Chief Martin, hands on the car right now.
Are you out of your mind? I'm your boss.
Not tonight. You blew a 12. Step back and turn around.
The machine's wrong. Let me call the captain.
Sir, do it now. Don't make this
Hands
harder.
behind your back, Chief.
This is ridiculous.
Ridiculous or not, you're under arrest for DUI. Keep those wrists together.
Cuffs secure.
You know who I am. I do. That's why we're doing this by the book.
You see the flashing lights in your rearview mirror, and your heart drops. You slow down, pull to the shoulder, and wait for the officer to approach. But imagine this. When the officer steps out, it's not some rookie or patrol sergeant. It's the chief of police himself, the highest-ranking man in the department, the one who gives orders, not takes them. Tonight, he's behind the wheel of an unmarked black SUV, dressed in plain clothes, driving home after midnight. The roads are quiet. The city is asleep. And yet, within minutes, everything he's built, his authority, his image, his control, is about to collapse in the glow of his own department's lights. The patrol car pulls up behind him. Two younger officers step out. They don't recognize him in the dark. They see only a civilian who ignored a stop sign and didn't signal. Their voices are firm, procedural, by the book. The chief stays calm at first, hands on the wheel, tone even. But as the questions continue, something inside him shifts. He identifies himself. They hesitate. Then another cruiser arrives, and suddenly the power dynamic starts to fracture. You can almost feel the air tighten, the tension between rank and protocol, between ego and duty, between the badge and the man who commands it, and when one of his own officers orders him to step out of the vehicle, refuses to back down, the chief makes one fatal mistake. He laughs. Seconds later, the sound of metal cuffs closes around his wrists, and the cameras are already rolling. The city was silent when it happened. A thin layer of mist rolled over the cracked pavement of West Haven Boulevard, blurring the glow of the streetlights into pale halos. The air was heavy with humidity, the kind that clung to skin and made the world feel slower than it was. It was 12:43 a.m., and Chief Aaron Dalton was driving home. He wasn't in uniform tonight. Just a gray shirt, dark jeans, and the faint exhaustion that came from 16 straight hours of meetings, reports, and politics. The SUV he drove was department-issued, black, unmarked, windows tinted, but on the inside, it smelled faintly of leather and the lingering trace of burnt coffee. Dalton had spent the evening at City Hall, negotiating budget allocations and defending the department's public image after a week of bad press. Complaints of excessive force, footage leaking online, a department under scrutiny. He had spoken with calculated calm, promised accountability, reassured everyone that reforms were underway. But the truth was heavier than words could carry. He knew how deep the cracks ran. He turned left onto Magnolia Street, one hand on the steering wheel, the other massaging his temple. The roads were empty, save for the occasional flash of headlights in the distance. He passed a small convenience store where a lone clerk mopped the floor. The faint buzz of a neon "Open 24 Hours" sign flickered in the corner of his eye. Then he saw it, blue and red lights flashing in his rearview mirror. At first, he didn't react. He thought they were passing by, headed somewhere else, but the lights stayed fixed behind him. Close, persistent. He frowned, easing his foot off the gas. The speedometer sat at 35, well within the limit. He checked the mirror again. The cruiser was right on his bumper now, siren chirping once in a sharp burst. Dalton muttered under his breath, signaling to pull over. He eased the SUV to the side of the road beneath a flickering street lamp. The pavement glistened with leftover rain. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, fingers drumming lightly against the steering wheel. Habit took over. Hands visible, window halfway down, driver's license ready. But something about this moment felt off. He was the chief of police. Every officer in the department knew his vehicle, his face, his voice. Whoever was behind him was either new or reckless. The driver's door of the cruiser opened. Two officers stepped out. Young. One couldn't have been older than 28. The other, maybe 30. Their uniforms were crisp, their posture sharp. The one on the driver's side approached first, flashlight beam slicing through the night. "Evening," the officer said. His tone was polite but guarded. "License and registration, please." Dalton nodded slightly, reaching slowly into his jacket pocket. "Sure thing, officer." He handed the license through the window. The officer shone the light on it briefly before lowering it. "Do you know why we pulled you over tonight?" "No," Dalton said calmly. "Can't say that I do." "You rolled through the stop sign back at Magnolia and 9th, the officer said. "You in a hurry?" Dalton blinked. "Magnolia and 9th? That's department jurisdiction. I just came through there. Didn't see a stop sign violation." The officer shrugged slightly. "Well, I saw one." The younger officer on the passenger side circled the SUV, shining his light through the back window. "Mind if I ask where you're headed?" "Home," Dalton replied, watching him carefully. "You boys new to the precinct?" The first officer tilted his head slightly, the tone of familiarity catching him off guard. "Transferred in last month, sir. Why?" Dalton leaned forward a little, the glow from the cruiser's lights flashing across his face. "You don't recognize me." The officer frowned. "Should I?" Dalton smiled faintly. "Chief Aaron Dalton, West Haven PD." Silence. For a split second, the street went still. The rain dripped from the lamppost, the sound barely audible over the distant hum of the cruiser's engine. The two officers exchanged a glance. The younger one stepped closer. "You're the chief?" "That's right." The older officer looked skeptical. "You got ID to confirm that?" Dalton blinked slowly. "My license isn't enough?" "Anyone can say they're somebody," the officer replied. "Mind stepping out for a second, sir?" Dalton's expression hardened. "You're detaining your own chief of police." "Just following procedure," the officer said, though there was a flicker of doubt in his voice now. Dalton exhaled through his nose, his patience thinning. He opened the door and stepped out. The cool air hit his face. He stood tall, towering slightly over both men. The lights from the cruisers painted his skin in alternating bands of red and blue. "Look," Dalton said, keeping his tone measured. "You've done your job. But this is unnecessary. You can radio dispatch. They'll confirm who I am." The younger officer hesitated. "We're supposed to verify ID in person when—" "Don't lecture me on procedure, son," Dalton interrupted, his voice firm now. "I wrote half the book you're quoting." The tension thickened. The two officers shifted, unsure of how far to push. The street was empty, the only witness the flickering lamplight above. "Sir," the first officer said, "I'm asking you to keep your hands visible." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "Hands where I can see them," the officer repeated. His tone was firmer now, the kind that came from nerves disguised as authority. Dalton stared at him, disbelief creeping into his voice. "You really don't know who you're talking to." The younger officer's hand rested on his holster. Not drawn, but close. "That's not relevant, sir. Step back from the vehicle." Dalton stepped forward instead, pointing toward the cruiser. "Call dispatch right now. They'll confirm my credentials." The older officer moved slightly closer. "Sir, step back," and that's when the laughter came. Sharp, disbelieving, edged with anger. Dalton laughed. "Unbelievable," he said under his breath. "My own department can't tell who their chief is." "You know what? Fine. You want to play it by the book? Let's do it." He reached into his back pocket for his department ID card. But the motion was too fast, too sudden. Both officers reacted at once. Hands up. Dalton froze, ID still halfway out of his pocket. "It's my badge," he said, his voice even now, but adrenaline had already taken over. The older officer grabbed his wrist. The younger one moved behind him. In seconds, cold metal clamped around his wrists. The cuffs locked with a click that echoed louder than anything else in the night. Dalton stood there, stunned, his breath fogged in the cool air. "You're cuffing your own chief," he said quietly. The younger officer spoke, voice shaking slightly. "Until we can verify your identity, yes, sir." The second cruiser pulled up just then, lights flaring across the scene. Another officer stepped out, a sergeant this time, someone Dalton recognized instantly. "What the hell's going on here?" The sergeant barked, striding forward. The two young officers turned, startled. "Possible ID issue," one stammered. He was uncooperative. The sergeant's eyes widened as the light hit Dalton's face. "Uncooperative? That's the chief." The younger officer's expression drained of color. The sergeant stepped forward, unlocking the cuffs with one motion. Sir, Dalton held up a hand. Save it. He rubbed his wrists, the skin already marked. The anger in his chest burned cold, not hot. Controlled, focused. Names, he said quietly. Both of you, they gave them. He repeated them slowly, memorizing every syllable. The sergeant began to apologize again, but Dalton turned away, walking back to his SUV. He didn't look back. The cuffs had left faint indentations on his skin, but that wasn't what stung. What stung was the realization that something had broken, not between him and his officers, but between authority and awareness, between recognition and respect. He drove home in silence, headlights slicing through the mist. Every few seconds his hands flexed on the steering wheel, the phantom weight of the cuffs still there. When he reached his driveway, he parked but didn't get out. He sat there for nearly 20 minutes, the engine still running. Outside, the world was silent again. Inside, something was shifting. Because what happened tonight wasn't just embarrassment. It was exposure, and by morning someone would leak the dashcam footage. Someone always did. The footage surfaced before sunrise. A shaky, dash-mounted recording, 37 seconds long, posted to a small community forum at 5:14 a.m. The title read, "Two Officers Arrest Their Own Police Chief." By 7 a.m., it was everywhere. Shared, mirrored, dissected. News outlets replayed it on loop. Commentators speculated about context. Memes flooded social media before the department's public relations team even arrived for work. Chief Aaron Dalton woke to the sound of his phone vibrating relentlessly against the nightstand. He'd fallen asleep in his living room chair, still in last night's clothes. The television was dark, but the glow of his phone lit the room in cold blue light. 36 missed calls. 12 text messages. 4 from the mayor. He scrolled through the first few. Headlines filled the screen. Police chief handcuffed by subordinates during routine stop. No special treatment, says department chief yet to comment. And the worst one. Authority collapses from the top. Dalton sat up, pressing a hand against his temple. He didn't need to watch the clip. He could see it perfectly in his mind. The lights, the hesitation, the laughter, the sound of the cuffs. At 7:12 a.m., he called the station. A dispatcher answered on the second ring, voice shaky. "Chief Dalton, sir, we were just—" "Get me Captain Reeves," Dalton said flatly. "Yes, sir, right away." A pause. Then the captain's voice filled the line, rough and tired. "Aaron, I was about to call you." "Too late." "I've seen it." "How bad?" Reeves exhaled. "Bad. The video's viral. Press is camped outside headquarters. Mayor's office is asking for an immediate statement." Dalton's tone sharpened. "Internal affairs?" "Already reviewing. They've identified the officers, Carter and Hayes, rookie transfers from the East Division. Both have been pulled from duty pending review." "Good," Dalton said. He stood, crossing the room to the window. The city below was waking up. Sirens, morning traffic, a distant haze of noise. "I want them in my office by 9. "They'll be there," Reeves said quietly. Dalton hung up. He stood still for a moment, the phone heavy in his hand. Then he turned toward the mirror above the mantel. His reflection looked older somehow. The fatigue etched deeper into his eyes. By the time he arrived at headquarters, the crowd had doubled. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing. Questions fired from every direction. "Chief, were you intoxicated? Did your officers overstep? Are you resigning?" He said nothing. Just walked past them, expression unreadable. Coat collar turned up against the wind. Inside, the lobby buzzed with low murmurs. Every head turned as he passed. On the third floor, Captain Reeves waited by the glass conference room. The blinds were drawn. Dalton stepped inside. The two officers, Carter and Hayes, sat at the table. Their posture was rigid, their eyes fixed forward. A recorder sat between them. Dalton didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table looking down at them. "Do you know why you're here?" "Yes, sir," Carter said. His voice was steady, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "Then tell me," Dalton said. Hayes swallowed. "Sir, we followed procedure. The subject, you, failed to identify yourself clearly. We requested compliance. Dalton's tone was ice. I identified myself 3 times. Respectfully, sir, Carter interjected. We couldn't verify that. It was dark. No uniform. No badge. Dalton stepped closer. You cuffed your chief. Silence. Hayes looked down. Yes, sir. Dalton studied them for a long moment. You were trained to handle civilians with respect, to de-escalate, to recognize rank. You failed all 3. He turned toward Reeves. Suspend them both. Effective immediately. Full investigation. Reeves nodded, jotting the order down. As Dalton left the room, Carter's voice broke the silence. Sir, permission to speak? Dalton stopped. You just did. Outside, the hallway was lined with officers pretending to work while listening through cracked doors. Word traveled fast in precincts like this, the kind of humiliation that stuck. In his office, Dalton closed the door and sat behind his desk. The blinds were half open, the morning light harsh. On the screen of his computer, emails piled up, city officials demanding statements, journalists requesting interviews, citizens offering support or outrage in equal measure. He opened one from the mayor. We need to contain this. Call me ASAP. He didn't. Instead, he opened the department's live news feed. Every local station was running the same story. The footage replayed endlessly. The moment the cuffs clicked shut, the look on his face, the line between command and collapse. He muted the sound. He thought of the officer's hesitation when he'd said his name. The confusion, the authority gap. It wasn't defiance, it was disconnect. They hadn't seen him as a leader, just another civilian, and maybe, he thought, that was the problem. By noon, the mayor called again. This time, Dalton answered. Aaron, the voice snapped through the speaker. We're bleeding credibility. You need to address this now. I will, Dalton said evenly. Then get in front of it. A press conference by 5. Make it clear it was a misunderstanding. We cannot afford another scandal. Dalton stared out the window. A misunderstanding? Yes, the mayor said sharply. You know how this works. Control the narrative. Dalton hung up without replying. At 4:30, the press gathered in the lobby. Cameras, reporters, flashes. The crowd hushed when he appeared. He stood at the podium, hands steady on either side. The department's seal gleamed behind him. Last night, he began, I was pulled over by 2 of my own officers during a routine patrol stop. They followed procedure as they understood it. Unfortunately, that procedure led to a moment that should never have happened. The flashes intensified. I want to make one thing clear, he continued. I was not targeted. I was not mistreated beyond that moment. But what happened reveals something deeper, how easily communication breaks down when authority becomes impersonal. The reporters shouted questions. Chief, are you saying the officers were right? Do you plan to resign? Are you pressing charges? Dalton held up a hand. This isn't about blame. It's about reflection. He paused, meeting the gaze of the cameras. We ask our officers to uphold respect in every situation. That must start from the top, including me. Then he stepped back, ignoring the barrage of questions. The statement was praised as measured, professional, strategic. But inside the department, it landed like a grenade. Some saw it as humility. Others saw it as weakness. By evening, factions were forming. Officers whispered in corridors, half the force supporting him, the other half questioning his control. Reeves tried to keep order, but the shift was already happening. Authority had turned fragile. That night, Dalton stayed in his office long after everyone else left. The halls were dark, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and rain leaking through the roof vents. He sat by the window, watching lightning flicker over the skyline. His phone buzzed. An unknown number, he answered. A voice, calm, measured, spoke on the other end. Chief Dalton, you don't know me, but I think you should see the rest of that video. Dalton frowned. The rest? The part they didn't post. Who is this? The line went dead. Dalton sat still, the hum of the storm filling the silence. Then an email notification appeared on his computer. No subject, no sender. Just a single attachment. Dashcam 2, move, he opened it. The screen flickered to life. The same stop. The same lights. But this time, the camera angle was from the second cruiser. It showed everything. After the cuffs were placed, the younger officer, Hayes, had muttered something. A slur, quiet but audible. Carter had looked away, saying nothing. Dalton froze. He replayed the clip. Once. Twice. A third time. The humiliation from last night shifted into something colder. Not anger, clarity. This wasn't just a procedural failure. It was rot, deep inside his own department. He leaned back in his chair, the rain pounding harder outside. The morning press had called it a misunderstanding. He now knew better, and by tomorrow, so would everyone else. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air over West Haven carried that metallic stillness that follows a storm. Inside the precinct, tension hung heavier than humidity. Every conversation ended when a door opened. Every whisper dropped when footsteps echoed through the hallway. The building that had once run like a machine now felt like a hive, humming with suspicion, loyalty fractured, trust dissolving faster than the coffee in the break room. Chief Aaron Dalton arrived before sunrise. The lobby was nearly empty, but the few officers on night duty froze as soon as he walked in. No greetings, no nods, just quiet stares that followed him to the elevator. He didn't need to ask if they'd seen it. They all had. The new footage. The one that hadn't been meant for public eyes. The one showing Hayes's muttered slur, Carter's silence, and the truth behind the misunderstanding. Dalton had sent it to the Internal Review Board at dawn with a simple note: investigate immediately. By 8 a.m., the fallout began. Hayes and Carter were summoned. Both arrived separately, both escorted by supervisors. Dalton stood in the conference room, documents laid out across the table, the atmosphere tight enough to choke on. Captain Reeves leaned against the far wall, watching. Dalton started without ceremony. Last night, a second video was discovered. It shows misconduct during your interaction with me. You both know what I'm referring to. Hayes shifted in his seat. Sir, Dalton raised a hand. Don't speak unless I ask you to. Hayes froze. Carter stared straight ahead. Dalton continued. This department has weathered scandals before. But what happened last night wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. It showed exactly what's wrong in this place. He pointed toward the screen where the paused frame of the dashcam sat frozen. Hayes standing behind him, mouth open mid-word, Carter looking away. Every recruit swears an oath. To protect, to serve, to act without prejudice. Yet here we are, talking about something I can't excuse, even if it was directed at me. The silence that followed was long and unbearable. Carter's voice finally broke it, low, steady, filled with something close to remorse. Sir, I should have stopped him. I heard it. I froze. I didn't want to make it worse. Dalton's stare cut through him. You made it worse by staying silent. The words landed like a slap. He turned toward Reeves. Effective immediately, Officer Hayes is terminated. Carter is suspended pending psychological evaluation and retraining. Hayes rose halfway out of his chair. You can't. Sit down, Dalton snapped. The voice of command silenced the room. You don't wear this badge anymore. The officers who had escorted them stepped forward. Hayes's protests turned into muttered curses as he was led out. The door shut behind him with a hollow echo. Carter sat motionless. Dalton watched him for a moment, then said quietly, You'll decide what kind of officer you're going to be when no one's watching. That choice will define you more than this uniform ever will. When Carter finally stood, his eyes were wet. Yes, sir. After they left, Dalton turned away from the window. It doesn't end here, he said to Reeves. You know it, Reeves nodded slowly. They'll fight it. Union, lawyers, everyone. You're making enemies. Dalton's expression didn't change. Good. That means I'm over the target. He gathered the files from the table and walked back to his office. Outside, the precinct buzzed again. But this time, the buzz carried an edge of fear. Officers spoke in hushed tones, glancing toward his door. Inside, Dalton began reviewing the disciplinary records. He saw patterns, not new, not surprising. Repeated complaints. Same language in every report. Officer acted appropriately under stress. Subject exhibited resistance. Body camera malfunction. The same recycled excuses. The same hollow phrases. He highlighted every repeated entry and wrote one word in the margin. Systemic. At 10:20 a.m., his assistant buzzed the intercom. "Sir, you've got a visitor." "Says she's from the state inspector's office." Dalton frowned. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her 40s, her hair tied back, her tone clipped and official. "Chief Dalton, I'm Investigator Lena Torres. The governor's office asked me to review your internal report before it spreads further." Dalton gestured for her to sit. "You've seen the footage?" "I have." She opened a folder. "And it's already out of your hands. Once it hit the state network, oversight took over. There'll be a full audit of your department." Dalton leaned back in his chair. "Then let them dig. They'll find what I've been trying to fix for years." Torres watched him closely. "You know how this looks politically. You expose your own people, you make enemies in every direction. Someone will try to pin this on you." He met her gaze. "They can try," she nodded slowly. "Good, because you'll need allies when this gets ugly." When she left, Dalton sat back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. He could already hear the storm coming. The union complaints, the mayor's calls, the headlines that would twist this into betrayal. By noon, the first of those calls arrived. The mayor's voice came sharp through the phone. "Aaron, what the hell are you doing?" "We had a plan. Contain this quietly. Instead, you've just put the whole department under state review." Dalton's tone was calm. The review was overdue. "You're not listening," the mayor snapped. "This will destroy trust in the city. We're talking lawsuits, budget freezes, protests." Dalton cut in. "You can't build trust on silence." There was a pause. Then a bitter laugh. "You're going to regret this." The line went dead. By the end of the day, word had spread that the chief was being investigated for procedural misconduct. It was a rumor, planted, deliberate. Anonymous sources claimed he'd been driving under the influence, that he'd provoked the stop, that the entire event had been staged for optics. The department's communication office refused to comment. His staff avoided his eyes, but inside the noise, he kept moving. He gathered files, pulled audit trails, traced where reports had been buried. Every document revealed another layer. Evidence suppressed, complaints reworded, footage deleted. It was bigger than two officers. It was culture. At midnight, he stood in the dim light of his office, the city beyond the window quiet again. A single desk lamp cast a circle of pale light over the stacks of files. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You've made a mistake." He stared at it, unreadable. Then another message followed. Next time, no cameras, he deleted both. Then, calmly, he turned on the recording device sitting beside his computer, the same one used for departmental debriefs. "This is Chief Aaron Dalton," he began. His voice was steady, cold. "It's July 14th, 1:06 a.m. If you're hearing this, it means what I found was true, and someone doesn't want it seen. Everything is documented. Every file, every recording, every name." He saved the recording, encrypted it, and uploaded it to an off-site server. When he shut down the computer, he finally felt the weight settle. The silence in the office was absolute. But for the first time since the cuffs closed around his wrists, he wasn't angry. He was clear. He understood now that this wasn't about reputation or humiliation. It was about exposure. The next morning, half the department would wake up to subpoenas. The mayor would face a formal ethics review, and the city that once trusted its badge without question would start asking who really held power behind it. Dalton locked his office, stepped into the empty hallway, and walked toward the elevator. Somewhere deep in the building, the hum of servers echoed, the sound of secrets preparing to surface. By dawn, the city was a pressure cooker. News vans idled outside police headquarters. Commentators argued over whether Chief Aaron Dalton was a whistleblower or a traitor. The mayor's office released a statement calling for leadership accountability, which was political code for distance. Inside, morale fractured completely. The chain of command had turned to static. Dalton arrived before the building filled. He moved through the empty corridors like a man walking through his own ghost. The air reeked of stale coffee and printer toner. On the wall outside his office, someone had taped a printed headline, "Chief turns on his own." He tore it down without slowing. In his office, the blinds were still half drawn from the night before. Files covered the desk, disciplinary records, email transcripts, copies of the suppressed footage. The glow from his monitor lit the room in pale blue. He was halfway through his coffee when Captain Reeves walked in. "State auditors are on their way," Reeves said. "2 cars. Full team," Dalton nodded. "Let them in." Reeves hesitated. "There's something else." The mayor called a private council meeting. "They're discussing interim leadership." Dalton didn't look up. "Meaning they're preparing to push me out." Reeves shifted uncomfortably. "That's what it looks like." "Good," Dalton said quietly. "Maybe they'll finally have to look at what they've been ignoring." At 9:30 a.m., the auditors arrived. 6 of them. Plain suits, federal IDs, precise voices. They spread across the building like surgeons opening an old wound, pulling records, seizing drives, interviewing officers one by one. Every file they touched carried the weight of something long buried. Dalton sat in his office while the city outside grew louder. Protesters had gathered by noon. 2 groups separated by barricades. One carried signs that read, "Accountability for all." The other shouted, "Support the blue." The sound reached up through the glass like the distant roar of a storm. When Investigator Torres entered, she carried a folder thicker than before. "Chief," she said, "we've reviewed your uploads. There's something you should see." She laid a printed chain of emails on his desk. The headers were from the mayor's office, copied to the city attorney. Dates going back 6 months. Subject lines about video suppression orders and department optics. Dalton read in silence. His pulse slowed instead of quickening. Every line confirmed what he already knew, that the city had been hiding misconduct for months, using legal phrasing and bureaucratic distance as camouflage. Torres spoke again. These were buried in an encrypted archive. "Whoever leaked them to you knew exactly where to look." Dalton looked up. "You're saying someone inside helped me?" "Looks that way," she said. "But they didn't leave a trace. Just a code name. Sparrow." He closed the folder. "Then Sparrow just saved this city." By mid-afternoon, the mayor's office went on the defensive. Press statements shifted tone, from denial to cooperation. The unions filed injunctions. Officers loyal to Dalton began guarding sensitive evidence. Others started clearing out desks, convinced their careers were over. Inside the storm, Dalton never raised his voice. He worked methodically, signing release forms, authorizing transparency requests, stripping secrecy from his own department piece by piece. At 5 p.m., a text arrived on his phone. Conference Room A. Now, it was from the mayor's chief of staff. Dalton went alone. The meeting room was small, curtains drawn, the smell of cologne and fear hanging in the air. The mayor sat at the table flanked by 2 city attorneys. The mayor spoke first. "Aaron, this has gone far enough. You've humiliated the department and the city. Step down quietly and we can contain the damage." Dalton took the seat opposite him. "Containment is how we got here." "This isn't idealism, it's survival," the mayor snapped. "If you keep pushing, we all go down." Dalton's eyes didn't waver. "Then maybe that's what's supposed to happen." Silence stretched. One of the attorneys spoke softly. "Chief, if you resign, we can preserve your pension, protect your record." Dalton stood. "You still think this is about me?" He left without another word. By evening, the internal network servers were under federal control. Investigators carted out boxes of evidence while officers watched from the hallway, faces unreadable. Outside, the crowd swelled. News anchors called it the largest protest West Haven had seen in 2 decades. At 8:15 p.m., Torres returned with breaking news. The governor's office just ordered a full state intervention. You'll be debriefed tomorrow morning. Dalton nodded slowly. That means they're taking over. She hesitated. They'll ask for your resignation before it starts. He smiled faintly. Then I'll give it to them. He spent the night clearing his office. Personal photos, commendation plaques, a small brass badge he'd kept from his first year as a patrol officer. When he finished, the room looked stripped of identity, just 4 walls and a desk that now belonged to someone else. Before leaving, he opened his laptop one final time. He typed a single statement, scheduled for release at midnight, and saved it to the department's official account. Transparency is not betrayal. Leadership means standing in the light, even when it burns. Then he shut the laptop, turned off the light, and walked out. The next morning, his resignation letter went public. The media framed it as a fall from grace, but within hours, something unexpected happened. Officers from neighboring cities, hundreds of them, signed an open declaration calling for independent oversight of all police departments statewide. Civilian petitions surged. For once, reform wasn't just a headline. It was motion. Dalton avoided interviews. He left the city quietly, renting a small cabin near the edge of Pine Ridge, 30 miles north. The silence there was clean. He spent the first week reading through reports that still reached his inbox, though he no longer had the title to act on them. By the second week, they stopped coming. For the first time in decades, he had no schedule. He rose with the sun, walked through the woods, brewed black coffee on a small stove. He thought about the faces of the men he'd led, the weight of the badge, the thin line between authority and abuse. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. When he opened it, Lena Torres stood there, coat dusted with snow. "You disappeared," she said. "Retired," he corrected. She stepped inside, setting a sealed envelope on the table. "From the governor. The inquiry's complete. They're recommending full systemic reform, training, oversight, accountability boards. It's already being drafted into legislation." Dalton didn't answer. He just looked at the envelope for a long moment. Torres smiled slightly. "You did what you came to do, Chief." "I did what needed doing," he said quietly. She left soon after. That night, he sat by the cabin window. The forest outside was dark, the wind steady through the trees. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge. The edges were worn now, the shine dulled by years of handling. He placed it on the table beside the governor's envelope. He didn't open it. He didn't need to, because somewhere in the city, new recruits were being trained under new standards. The same department that had once handcuffed its own chief was now teaching cadets that rank meant nothing if integrity was lost. And in the quiet, that was enough. Dalton leaned back in his chair, the badge glinting faintly in the firelight. For the first time in months, he felt something close to calm. Not triumph, not vindication, just release. The city would move on. It always did. But buried inside its reforms, inside its rewritten codes and retrained officers, would live the night one man refused to look away. He watched the fire burn low, the edges of the badge glowing softly. The night outside was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, the kind that follows truth finally spoken. And as the last ember faded, he whispered to no one, "Now they'll remember. You've seen power turn on itself. You've watched the chief of police, the man meant to command, end up in cuffs because truth doesn't recognize rank. You've seen how quickly respect disappears when ego takes the wheel, and how authority built on fear eventually collapses under its own silence. But here's what matters most. You saw what happened when one man refused to hide behind a badge. Aaron Dalton didn't fight for revenge. He fought for clarity, for a moment where the system had to face its reflection and couldn't look away. Because power isn't what you hold. It's what you choose to do when someone takes it from you. In the end, he didn't walk away a hero. He walked away human, and that's what makes his story burn so deeply. The chief who fell from command didn't lose his integrity. He found it. So when you think about justice, don't picture courtrooms or headlines. Picture that night, the flashing lights, the quiet decision to do what's right, even when it costs everything. Because truth doesn't protect itself. People do. If this story made you look differently at authority, good. That's how awareness begins. That's how systems change. One person, one decision, one refusal to stay silent. And if you think this story ended here, it didn't. Because next week, we're covering a case that made national headlines when a deputy tried to expose his own department and uncovered something far darker than corruption. Until then, stay alert, stay aware, and remember, the line between power and justice is drawn by whoever dares to tell the truth first. And that person could be you.